So the bipartisan energy innovation and carbon dividend tax has recently been reintroduced in the House, the carbon tax bill, right? And what is,
with the proceeds sent back to the House.
yes. What is your position on the bill, and would you be willing to support it and even co-sponsor it? So first, there has been a recent debate over whether different environmental groups have lobbied me to not support a carbon tax, and others have lobbied me to support it. So I want to get a sense here. This is exactly the perfect issue to get a sense here. Some folks have felt like it's going to lead to a slower reduction of carbon, and I think that we all want to reduce carbon. So, is there anybody here who? Because I feel like we have a lot of people agree. Any of you here oppose a carbon tax? Raise your hand. Okay. Before I answer it, I'd love to hear from my my environmental advisors here on what your thoughts are. This was just introduced by Congressman Chris this past week, right? I believe with Congressman Rich. Thoughts on the new carbon tax bill?
So you may actually be able to give us the details of the bill better than I certainly can.
I don't mean just the bill, just the general concept
Okay.
of carbon tax.
I think that, so my sense is that you have to create incentives to cut down on our carbon emissions and our greenhouse gas emissions. So with dividend, it's a great concept. I think for me, one of the things that I'm always looking for in those types of policies is who's going to be most affected. Is there an equitable impact here? And I don't know enough about this particular bill to say where this bill lands. But I'll give you an example. We have a sister organization in Washington State, and 2 years ago, Washington State actually tried to advance a carbon tax. Unfortunately, the biggest impact was going to be on low-income households. And so many in the environmental community in Washington State said, we can't move forward with a carbon tax or carbon dividend at that cost. We can't allow it to add yet another burden on communities that are already bearing more than their fair share. So I would kind of put that out there as, I think that putting a price on carbon makes a lot of sense. It's going to, for folks who think that the market can be an assist on making sure that we're cutting down on our emissions, it's absolutely a good idea. I think we have to think about what are impacts like that.
If you might stand up, this is the dialogue here. It's exactly why we're here today.
If I may add, this bill intends to tax carbon at the source, so at the well field, at the mine, and then return the proceeds back to households as shares. Like a two adult household would get 2 shares. Like you would divide the total amount you get back by the total number of citizens in the United States, and everybody would get the same share. So it means that low-income people are going to end up doing a little bit better because their expenses are going to be less compared to the money that is coming back. Now, rich people who have like carbon-intense lifestyles, then they may lose a little bit under this, but in the whole scheme of things, it wouldn't be hurting them too much, but it would be stimulating the economy and creating jobs. And Citizens Climate Lobby is one of the organizations that have been pushing for this. There's also like a Republican organization, which is the Climate Council, I don't remember the exact name, but they're also pushing for this. And economists worldwide are pushing for this sort of idea of carbon with the dividend being returned to households in an equal manner. And there's many studies talking about how that would cut carbon emissions and how it would help stimulate the economy with jobs as well. So I invite you to research Citizens Climate Lobby and this particular bill, the Energy Innovation and Dividend Act. So
does it say in the bill who would be the regulatory body who would be in charge of facilitating and keeping track of the impact of the climate or the carbon credits?
Yeah, I probably said, but I don't remember right.
Okay, because that would be really.
It probably would be EPA. I mean, the only other organization would be Department of Interior, but it's the mining aspect. But we'll get those details. I don't want to put everybody on the spot to know every detail of the act.
I just want to start a conversation.
Right, and I wanted to have kind of a debate over the carbon tax thing. I'm glad you mentioned the Washington case because that was the one that was brought up to me. And so first, I'm leaning towards supporting it, and I'll make a decision over the next 30 days about co-sponsoring it. But it's something that I'm very interested in, and I followed it this week. I saw the press conference for Governor Chris and Congressman Deutsch, and my staff is already reviewing the details of it to make a final decision on it. I think the goal is we all want to reduce carbon, and everybody here, that's not the debate here. We know we want to reduce our carbon footprint, and the key will be which ones are the best to do. But it's something that if asked to vote on today, we'll vote yes. But we're reviewing for co-sponsorship now. But this is exactly why we're having a town hall meeting on it, to hear from folks about these ideas, because feedback is so important. And you can't make these decisions in a vacuum, and you can't make it just with your ledge team doing an analysis. And we have a great legislative team, folks who've lived in Central Florida for a long time, who now work for me in DC. So thank you for that, and let's follow up over the next couple weeks on that. Excuse me. Next we have Piper Vargas. Thank you so much. The Stanton Power Plant has recently had air and water federal violations. What can we do to make sure they are held responsible and are currently in compliance? So let's talk about the whole ball of wax here. Thank you for bringing this up. And obviously we've been following this for a while. I got to meet with Mom's Clean Air Force several times over the last year. Communities in the northeastern part of the district, particularly around the Waterford Lakes, Stony Brook area, in fact, it is a resident of that area on my team, have complained about air quality issues related to the coal burning plant. And Orlando already prides itself as being a forward-thinking environmental city, but it has this one sort of underbelly to it that we've all kind of known has to be fixed at one point or another. So I was waiting for my committee assignments, but I'd already asked my staff to work on a letter to OUC and the Stanton plant to explain any violations and what the plans are to fix them. Now, some of that's available online, but given that now I have my committee assignments and that is under our jurisdiction, I'm hopeful that will put a little more pressure on it. You all may know the day that you all filed suit, I came out clearly in support of converting it at least to gas for right now, and then ideally we would go beyond that at some point for air quality issues. So we're very supportive of not only your push to convert away from coal, the OUC plant, but supportive of the lawsuit, and already working on a letter to the power plant that would copy our chairman. One dynamic that's neat about the Energy and Commerce Committee is that our chairman is Frank Pallone, who was my congressman when I was at Rutgers for 4 years. Voted for him twice, and he always makes a big deal about that. That was one of the reasons why it was such a good fit to get on there, because these are big committees. If you have a good relationship with the chairman, you could do a lot more than if you were kind of strangers, you barely know each other. So I'm going to be working with him as well, but we want not only these violations to be remedied, but we want to continue to put pressure to convert from coal to gas. Obviously, there are financial considerations for many communities, but we have to move the ball forward, and it has to be done over the next couple of years. And these are things that I'm looking forward to continue working with you on. But as you need quotes and pats on the back and support when it gets tough, look to my office because we're with you.
Thank you.
You bet. Any comments that you all would like to make?
Sure. I'm part of the first 50 coalition, as Chuck is, in Organized Florida and Sierra Club and Audubon, and a big group of a bunch of different group leaders that when we came up last year with just an easel of all the different issues that were important to all these different organizations, and with stickers we got to vote on what was important to us. Overwhelmingly, all the organizations, the number one thing is to shut that plant down. And you've got a friend with the first 50 coalition. The things that you're going to start seeing is when you start impacting more money. And not to bring back the real estate thing again, but it is really relevant. Just 2 weeks ago, I went to an attorney's firm that held continuing education course that dealt with those things. We are now required to have disclosures that there is a pending lawsuit and that you live in an area of 32825 and 32828, that those zip codes are affected, and we have to disclose it as part of a sale or even as a rental. So that's something else to add.
Good.
Can I just
Yes,
add one
please.
real quick? I don't know a lot specifically about Stanton, but I do know, and I'm sure you all know in the room, that OUC is a public entity, right? And so about 25% of Florida, 75% of Florida utilities are investor-owned, and so you don't really have a say, other than as a consumer. But with OUC, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, there are a handful of communities where your local elected officials actually have a say in how that utility operates. So I would take advantage of that and remember that.
And on the investor-owned utilities, having the Clean Power Plan still in place because the repeal was botched allows us to continue to encourage them to move forward. We saw a big announcement by Florida Power and Light about a huge new solar project that they're doing. I do think we need to continue through that, push people to gas and then beyond gas to solar, wind. And then the key is also with biofuels to get them done in the right way. Because I think biofuels are one of the future sources, but we have to assess them right. One of the things that doesn't always happen is it takes a lot of carbon to grow some of the fuel stock, and that has to be calculated into as we look at biofuels. See, it gets real complicated, right? Everything we think is great, and then it's like we have to look at additional things and make sure we're truly analyzing this. Next we have Jack Dixon. Thanks for the questions. I think we talked a little bit about, first question, any push for the carbon tax. I'm generally supportive of the carbon tax, and we're going to be reviewing the bill that was just introduced last week over the next 30 days. Because I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and because I'm on the Natural Resources Committee, in these two areas, I'm already very serious about my co-sponsorships, but now I have to be like super serious because that now is a vote that you now have on the committee once I sign up to it. So I want to make sure that once I'm in, and I'm never going back. And so, but note that we have a great team that is analyzing these things so that once we're in, you can count on us when it gets tough or otherwise.
Could I add something?
Yeah, sure.
I agree with the lady over here that was talking earlier on the carbon tax, that, you know, you need to feed some of that, at least some of that tax back to the public because it's a, you know, it's a regressive tax.
Sure.
But it's, and I know tax is a bad word in Congress, right?
Well, we would
so
never
feeding it back
without
up.
them, so I mean,
Yeah,
we wouldn't be protecting our community without them.
right. But feeding it back might, help offset
Sure.
the negativity there. The other alternatives, you know, cap and trade or carbon offsets are all good, but they're awfully complicated compared to, you know, carbon tax is straightforward. You got to figure out how much it costs and add it to the price of the bill.
Sure, and you know, 2 points just going more broadly on your commentary. One, when you first get in your first class on property law and environmental law, and I'm harking back to the GW days, there's the problem of the commons, which is where they come up with this idea that if you have a commons in a small village, people throw their garbage out there, their waste, and everybody suffers, so you have to regulate the commons or else you're just gonna have people get sick. And so you have to make polluters internalize costs to society or else no one will, and then we all have pollution problems. And so carbon tax then now puts a cost to polluting the commons. In this case, it's the whole world. So I'm familiar since the very beginning of my legal training with these issues, and I get why we have to internalize it. And secondly, you're touching sort of tangentially on a big strategy as we go into this term. We have the House, but we don't have the Senate. And we have a president that we have to get so much momentum to get through anything that we want in these subject areas that it's got to come through where it's just not worth fighting. And so there will be bills that we'll pass that will be our values, truly 100%, an aspiration. things that we want to do, that we hope to do in the future, knowing that, you know what, maybe the Senate's not going to pass them, but we want to pass them anyway because they're important to us. But then there will be more strategic bills that may be shades of those aspirational bills that are designed to at least get some incremental change. 2 years in majorities is shame to waste if we don't try to get some things passed. So while there will be big, bold ideas, there will also be ideas that are just enough where we can pass the House and the Senate and accomplish things. And 2 of those things are the Land Water Conservation Fund that was just discussed, the Water Research Development Act, but a carbon tax could be one of those things. So we will be aspirational, but we also need to be have a dual strategy of being realistic so that we get some things done this term. Your next question is any emphasis on wildlife corridors. So with the Land Water Conservation Fund, that can assist with our state and local partners on that. I know we've seen great programming on wildlife corridors that I've been a part of, that Ms. Moncrief has been a part of, to highlight how tenuous they are now. And I was just involved with like what's the name of the videos that the movies I've been doing? Anyway, the wildlife corridor videos that we've had even National Geographic highlight nationally, talking about the wildlife corridors for the Everglades, the wildlife corridors going into North Florida, and then just recently the wildlife corridors through Central Florida, Kissimmee River, and I-4 to try to trail what, you know, a bear in this region, or even a young male Florida panther can come around here sometimes, and other species. So it's absolutely critical, and I think that's where we need to hold the state legislature accountable to fully funding in the spirit of the Land Legacy Amendment, and we need to pass the Land Water Conservation Fund to make sure we have enough funding for this. But without wildlife corridors, you lose wildlife because they have nowhere to go through to migrate for their various habitats. And so, and a lot of that, these are iconic species like the Florida panther, like the lynx, like the bear, and others. And so those would be things that will, on the federal level, primarily focus on the major funding. You'll see that as a continuing theme. And then use our bully pulpit to help our state and local partners. But here in Osceola County, one thing I'm very proud about is that we have the urban growth boundary. So they basically took the top quarter of the county and said, here's where you can develop. And then they took the bottom 3/4 of the county and said, here's where you can only have ag or conservation land. And one of the fortunate things about Osceola is that a lot of our development was already concentrated up here. So we could just cordon it off and then just say the rest of this, you know, needs to be for low impact agriculture like ranching, or most of it's conservation land and federal and state parks. And also helps out with public services, because asking these guys to go already down to Points Head is tough. But can you imagine going down to they wanted to create the Sunbridge development way in the south part of the county? Over by Yeehaw Junction, I mean, as it is, they're trying to deal with folks where there's incidents on the turnpike way south, but there's huge communities down there. It'd be crazy. Give me a second. So these are obviously, but it ain't all perfect. In Polk County, we need to get them to put one together. In Orange County, they almost breached theirs by crossing the Econo-Lachatan. And so these are important issues that obviously we're supportive on. I wanted to give Aliki a chance to talk about the wildlife corridors, because I know you guys are in the center of this stuff.
So I think the thing about the wildlife corridor in Florida, those films, that organization did such an amazing job of helping people understand how important they are. And regardless of party, there's actually a lot of interest at the state legislature on designating a Florida wildlife corridor. And so one of the things that we're talking about with our conservation partners about is, you know, actually trying to name these places. It's an amazing power when you name something. It's something that people can rally around. That's where resources tend to go to things that are named. So I would encourage folks to keep up with the Florida Wildlife Corridor, because they're doing incredible work. Also also connecting, you know, people sometimes think of wildlife corridors as just these vast wild spaces that maybe they don't feel particularly accessible. But there's actually a lot of urban sort of fingers of the wildlife corridors that are really important. So.
I believe that you can, if you go to Ideas for Us, they did have the person, the group that did the filming of that, and I do believe that's on their website.
And then the last question, given the modifications to the Kissimmee River, will that be a consideration in whether the Kissimmee River can be a wild city designation? It's in fact the opposite. It's the fact that we've modified it back and we spent $1 billion to restore it that's driving the push to save it. Because why would we spend $1 billion and then not have basic federal protections on there? So the fact that it was gone and now is back is not hurting us, it's actually helping us because it's a protection of that investment. I know you want to make a brief comment, so.
Regarding also the county's urban field boundaries.
Yes.
It is a good idea, however, in practice over the past 3 or 4 years, it has been moved twice. With a single landowner and going all the way to the Burn County line is probably going to have a significant impact on that eastern wildlife corridor. And so when we're talking, it is protecting the south part of the county. I'm very glad for that. It's better than having nothing, but urban growth boundaries and rural boundaries need to be more of an enforceable, actual law rather than a theory that can get changed. Because if it gets changed all the time, it's not really boundary.
Sure. So, excellent.